What's going on YouTube? Tom here, and today we have another in-depth steel video. Today, the steel we're going to be focusing on is CPM Cru-Wear, something that a lot of people seem to enjoy, and I've had very limited experience with until this little project to kind of figure the steel out. Um, I had a pair of three before this one in the gray G10, and like I said, very limited use. But what use I did have on it, I was pretty impressed with. I've been using this one for roughly 2.5 months or so, almost three. Had it since July, and yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and talk about this steel and my opinions on it. So first off, Cru-Wear is an air hardening tool steel. It has higher wear resistance than D2 and higher toughness than M2. That's straight from Crucible's site. Um, Say it has a great combination of wear resistance and toughness. And the only thing I can remember Cru-Wear being in is the Spyderco Sprints, PM2, Para 3, Military, and Manix 2. There is a Native 5 Sprint out. I don't know if it's still out right now from KnifeCenter with the smooth G10, just like this Manix has. They've done two or three different runs. They had the initial like gray checkered G10, then they had the uh, carbon fiber Manix, and then they came out with the smooth G10 variants. And this has to be my favorite. Super comfortable. I don't like the high texture of some of the other stuff. The smooth G10 is super comfortable. I think the jimping is actually knocked down a little bit on these because normal Manix jimping bothers me, but this doesn't. It doesn't feel quite as aggressive. I think Bark River also does a couple knives in Cru-Wear. There's probably a couple other companies out there making knives in Cru-Wear as well, but I think Spyderco is the most widely known and it's probably going to be the most widely available. For right now, I think you're just going to be able to find them on the secondary market. I'm not sure if that Native 5 is still up at KnifeCenter. So let's talk about the composition. 1.1% carbon, 1.15% tungsten, 2.4% vanadium, 7.25% chromium, 1.6% moly, 1.2% silicon, and trace amounts of sulfur. The thing that surprised me about the composition, those are relatively small amounts of the alloying elements in this steel. There's not a super high percentage of anything in there. Really, the most notable might be the tungsten, and then the vanadium at 2.4%. Looking at the steel, it doesn't look very impressive on paper. It doesn't look like it's going to be a super high wear or a high wear resistant steel. It looks like it's probably going to be on the tougher side. But I wanted, like I said, to test this stuff, see what I thought about it, and boy was I wrong. So first off, we're going to talk about the corrosion resistance. This knife has been carried throughout the middle of summer, 95 plus degree days while working or being outside doing whatever. And there's been quite a few days that this thing has been covered in sweat for hours at a time. The only sort of corrosion I've seen is some slight discoloration here in the plunge grind, and you guys might not even be able to see it on camera. It got like this kind of off, like almost like a brownish color. And I can't seem to get it out, so that does seem to be more to do with the steel rather than something just being on the knife. Very, very small amounts of discoloration on that. That's actually really good considering when I was carrying my large Nkosi outside during the same conditions, I got one little spot of rust that I had to take off on that. So very impressive for a steel that's not supposed to be stainless. Next, we're going to go ahead and talk about sharpening. Cru-Wear, as you guys probably already know, is an excellent steel to sharpen. It sharpens up very, very easily, and the edge that comes up is incredibly fine. Cru-Wear is an extremely fine-grained steel, so the edge that it creates is going to be super, super fine. Spyderco seemed to do this Cru-Wear very, very well. I've heard that this run of Cru-Wear is a little bit softer than previous runs, but it still does perform well. The burr just falls off really easily on this Cru-Wear, and it's not difficult to attain a hair whittling edge off of this stuff. It's probably the easiest steel I have to sharpen out of all the super steels that I own. I'd say it's easier to sharpen than S30V. The edge that comes up is just so much finer. It's such a dream. It's like a knife nerd's dream to be able to sharpen Cru-Wear. It's excellent. It's also very easy to strap back. It responds really well to the straps. I've done that off of use, light use, and you can go back, strap it, and the edge that comes back up is darn close to what it originally was. It's never going to be absolutely perfect, but it's better than most in that regard. So this is another one that I did. I recorded all of my use with, and we're going to go ahead and talk about that now. I recorded all my use from a little bit into August all the way into September or so. So let's see here. 8/15, I cut 42 feet of cardboard, 3 small boxes, 1 medium box, 2 large boxes, and I had shiny spots all along the edge, and I did a full resharpening to remove the fatigued steel. So that initial edge, so that wasn't the factory edge, that was the first edge that I put on it. And it seemed like Spyderco, I hate to say burn it, but it was that edge was definitely a little bit overcooked from the factory, so it didn't do very well. So off the next edge, 8/16, I had 1 medium box, 19 feet of cardboard. The next day I had 38 feet of cardboard, 1 medium box. The next day I had 62 feet of cardboard. The next day I opened 22 knife boxes, 6 small boxes, 3 medium boxes, and 6 feet of cardboard. So that's a pretty darn good amount of use between that last sharpening. I really think I could have kept it going, but then I worked with some rubber roofing stuff, so I cut 12 feet of fiberboard, which is like this foam that has fiberglass embedded in it. And that stuff, even Maximet can't stand up to that stuff. I cut 10 feet of rubber roofing, and when I was trying to cut the rubber roofing off of this old roof, my knife slipped out and banged right into a metal pipe, so I put a pretty darn good ding in the edge, probably about half the width of the bevel, and I was actually very impressed with how well that Cru-Wear held up as far as toughness goes, because I slammed that thing into that metal pipe. So at that point, the knife was completely dull anyhow from that fiberboard. Like I said, that stuff is extremely abrasive, and it needed a full resharpening. So this time I did a full resharpening with ceramics as my finishing stones, the 1200 and 1600 grit ceramics, because you always hear about how much better this stuff does with a higher grit edge. And since it's relatively low vanadium content at like the 2.6%, I think I said, I figured the ceramics wouldn't affect it quite as much as they do on some of the other steels that have more vanadium in them. So after that, we cut 3 zip ties, 5 pallet straps, 2 medium boxes, 21 feet of cardboard, and then on the very next day, I cut more of that fiberboard, and it was dull yet again. So I really didn't get to see how well that edge was going to hold up, which is kind of disappointing, because like I said, that fiberboard is just nuts as far as it being abrasive. So I went home and I resharpened it diamond only again, so 200 to 1000 grit diamond. So off of that edge, I cut 46 feet of cardboard on 9.2. On 9.3, I cut 22 feet of cardboard. On 9.5, I cut 19 price tags and 63 feet of cardboard. I think I have a picture of what I mean by cutting price tags. 9.6, I cut 6 feet of cardboard, and I noticed that it was starting to get a little bit dull in 1 or 2 spots, so I strapped it on the 16 and 4 micron CBN. So I had 1 small spot on the edge that the 16 micron couldn't fix, and it would still cut paper but raggedy. Other portions of the edge that did not have any deformation were at least 75% as sharp as the initial edge. On 9.7, I opened 1 small box and I cut 20 feet of cardboard. On 9.8, opened 4 small boxes and cut 23 feet of cardboard, and that's where my use stopped. So that gives you guys a good idea of the amount of use that Cru-Wear can kind of go through before it needs any resharpening. As far as edge retention goes, we did go ahead and we ran a edge retention test on this using the normal parameters: 200 to 1000 grit diamond, 16 and 4 micron CBN on leather. I do have to say this one was sharpened at about 16 degrees per side. It was about 15 degrees per side from the factory, and it's slowly, accidentally increased to 16, trying to match that angle every time I go to resharpen it. So this is not at the typical 18, so you are seeing a little bit better performance than it normally would. But we went ahead and we cut cardboard until it would no longer cut computer paper. And the result here was 362.98 feet, which is not something I was expecting. Cru-Wear, from just my use, I was expecting it to do maybe 200 to 250 feet total, just from the feelings I had as far as how the edge deteriorates and everything. But 362.98 feet blew my mind. Just an absolutely incredible result for what the steel is. The other thing I noticed about this during the edge retention testing that I haven't noticed on any other steel before is that it held a fine edge for an incredibly long time. I couldn't believe how long it was holding a fine edge. So you can kind of tell by how easily it's cutting through the paper, just how fine that apex still is. And it was just gliding through paper for, I'd say, at least a good 175 or 200 feet. So I wish I did fine edge testing, and I might start doing it here in the future. But it was awesome to see just how long this stuff held a fine edge. And it really didn't seem to drop off as far as sharpness goes until the last maybe 10%. And that's excellent. That's exactly what you want in a knife steel. You want it to stay as sharp as possible for as long as possible, and then it to go dull. It's not like other steels, like the higher carbide steels, like let's say Maximate. I know I bring up Maximate a lot, but Maximate kind of loses that fine edge and then just kind of deteriorates into a working edge that lasts for basically forever. So this steel is the exact opposite of that, which is cool. Excellent knife steel for sure. Let's talk about edge stability. It seemed to have good edge stability, but not great edge stability in use. So as I was cutting cardboard and stuff, you'd cut 50 to 100 feet of it, and you'd look down and you'd see some shiny spots in the edge, which is telling me that something is hitting that edge or it's kind of rolling a little bit. And I wasn't super impressed with the edge stability through use, just through the everyday stuff that I'm putting it through. It's stuff that it can be taken out with a strap, but it's not extremely impressive in that regard like some other steels are. And I think part of that could be it's a relatively low alloy steel, and as far as that goes, it's also not super hard. This is going to be hardness tested. I think everything from this run has been close to like 61 to 62. Previous runs were closer to 63 to 64. So with it being a lower HRC, possibly, that could explain some of its lower edge stability. It was prone to small rolls and shiny spots, and that is a characteristic of the tougher steels. Instead of holding that apex, maintaining that apex, and chipping when it starts to get really worn down, it just tends to roll instead. That's just something that you're going to deal with on something that's supposed to be a tougher steel. So I went ahead and ran an edge stability test on this one. Alright guys, all done with edge retention testing. Now we are moving on to edge stability. I have 10 zip ties here on this broom stick that I pulled off of my broom in the house. I have nothing else to zip tie these to. We used the back inch of the blade back here for the edge retention testing. We're going to use just the tip.
That's what she said!
On this one for edge stability. So let's go ahead and pop these zip ties. Alright, there is all 10. Let's take a look for edge damage. Not seeing any at all. Let's see what it does on paper. Absolutely nothing, as to be expected with a nice hard steel like CruWear. I actually did end up digging into the broomstick a lot. I don't know if you guys can see that at all, but there is definitely some paint missing where I accidentally dug into that. So anyhow, it's good to go as far as edge stability goes. And it seemed to perform super well with that edge stability test, cutting the 10 zip ties. There was no rolling, no edge deformation whatsoever. Honestly, if you told me that was a fresh edge right off the stones, I would believe you. It was really impressive as far as how well it performed with that. As far as toughness goes, I did some light prying with it, and it had no effect on it whatsoever, kind of as to be expected. But I also went ahead and ran a toughness test running this knife into some staples. Alright guys, now that we're done with edge stability, we're going to move on to toughness testing. This is something that you guys might run into on a daily basis. Some staples in cardboard, some big heavy packing staples. We're going to use the very front portion of the blade right here to do that. That is the only thing that hasn't been stressed out. If we use the back portion, it's already pretty fatigued, and I feel like it has a higher chance of rolling or chipping. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start the cuts on these and slam as hard as we can into the staples. We're going to do 4 total. Alright, that is 4 hits pretty darn hard into this. We definitely have some damage here. Looks like some rolling and possibly some small chips. We're going to throw it up on the USB microscope, and I'm going to throw those pictures up and we'll talk about them. As far as toughness goes, it looks pretty darn good though. This thing does absolutely phenomenal as far as impact toughness goes. Like I said earlier, I ran this thing into a steel pipe really hard, and the ding in the edge really wasn't as big as it really should have been. And that showed again here with the staples. Very minimal damage, and instead there was some light rolling, but it was mostly very small chips, which I actually prefer. Those little dings in the edge could be removed in less than 5 minutes. As you guys can see here with the pictures of the edge, that the amount of bevel that they're taking up is very small. Honestly, you could continue to cut with this knife for a decent amount of time and not take those chips out, and it will still do well. So very good as far as toughness goes. Alright here, so as far as my final thoughts and conclusion on CruWear, I just think this is a wonderfully balanced steel. High wear resistance with great toughness and pretty darn good corrosion resistance for being a non-stainless steel. It seems to be one of the best all-around steels on the market as far as high wear resistance with darn good toughness. If those two things are something that you're interested in, this is a steel that you definitely should try. I knew the steel was really darn good in use, but the results push it to the top of my favorite steels. I think this might overtake Maximate as far as my favorite steels go, because this one, it requires less thought about what you're cutting and what you're doing with it than Maximate does. It's something that can be used for a wider variety of tasks and still hold an edge for a relatively long period of time. Very impressive steel. If you have the opportunity to get something in CruWear, I definitely recommend it. I can't ever remember talking to someone who said that they didn't like CruWear. So just an absolutely perfect steel for knives, and I think this one will be a permanent stay in my collection. Awesome knife, awesome steel, newfound love of the Manix with using this knife. So I used to hate the Manix. Now it's up there as one of my favorite knives to carry. Anyhow, guys, that's going to do it for me as far as in-depth on CruWear. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like down below and subscribe to continue to see more videos just like this one. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.